Jake Morrison stared at the legal papers in his hands as his transport ship moved through the asteroid belt. The words on the document still did not make sense to him. His Uncle Henry had left him everything. The old space farm on asteroid XK739 was now his property, along with all the equipment and whatever debts came with it. Jake had not seen Uncle Henry in over 10 years. The last time was at his graduation from Mars Agricultural Academy. Uncle Henry had seemed strange that day, talking about secrets in space and ancient mysteries. Jake thought the old man had spent too much time alone in the asteroid belt. Now Henry was dead, and Jake owned a failing farm in the middle of nowhere. The transport pilot called back to him from the cockpit. They were getting close to the asteroid. Jake looked out the small window and saw a dark rock floating in space. It was bigger than most asteroids but still looked tiny compared to the planets he knew. A few metal structures stuck out from the surface like mechanical trees. The solar panels were old, and many had cracks in them. Jake felt his stomach drop as the transport ship landed on the small docking platform. The artificial gravity kicked in, and suddenly, he had weight again. The pilot helped him carry his bags to the airlock door. Jake paid the man and watched the transport fly away, leaving him alone on the dead rock. The main habitat module was bigger than Jake expected. Inside, the air was stale, but breathable. The lights came on automatically. When he entered, Uncle Henry had lived here for 30 years, but the place felt empty and cold. Jake walked through the living area, seeing old furniture and outdated computer screens. Dust covered everything like a gray blanket. In the kitchen, Jake found some expired food packets and a coffee maker that looked older than he was. A note was stuck to the refrigerator door, written in Uncle Henry's messy handwriting. It said, "Jake, welcome to your new home. Check the basement when you are ready, but be careful down there. Some things cannot be explained, only experienced." Jake read the note 3 times. The basement part confused him. Everyone knew you could not have a basement on an asteroid. The artificial gravity only worked inside the habitat modules, and even then it was not strong enough to support underground construction. Jake folded the note and put it in his pocket. He spent the rest of the day looking through Uncle Henry's things. The bedroom had clothes that smelled like machine oil and old books about farming techniques. The office was full of papers showing the farm's financial problems. Uncle Henry had been losing money for years. The soil production units were breaking down and replacement parts cost more than the crops were worth. Jake found Uncle Henry's personal computer and managed to get past the password using the old man's birthday. The files showed research projects that made no sense. Temporal mechanics, quantum field theory, and something called dimensional gateway studies. None of it had anything to do with farming asteroids. As evening came, Jake made himself dinner from his own food supplies. The habitat's windows showed the starfield outside. It was beautiful, but lonely. Jake began to understand why Uncle Henry had acted so strange all those years. Living alone in space could make anyone think weird thoughts. After dinner, Jake decided to explore more of the habitat. He had found all the main rooms, but the note mentioned a basement. Jake walked through every corridor twice, looking for stairs or an elevator that went down. Finally, he noticed something odd about one wall in the storage room. The wall had a different color than the others, and when Jake touched it, the metal felt warm. His hand found a hidden panel that slid open. When he pressed it, behind the panel was a small control pad with numbers and letters. Jake tried Uncle Henry's birthday again and heard a soft click. The wall section moved aside, showing a stairway going down into darkness. Jake stood there staring. The stairs were made of the same metal as the habitat, but they definitely went down into the asteroid itself. That should have been impossible. The rock was solid, and there was no way to dig through it with basic tools. Jake went back to get a flashlight from Uncle Henry's toolbox. He also grabbed a portable air scanner to make sure it was safe to breathe down there. When he returned to the hidden entrance, he could see that the stairs went down about 20 feet before turning to the right. The air scanner showed normal atmosphere. Jake took a deep breath and started walking down the stairs. His footsteps echoed in the narrow space. The stairs were clean, with no dust or dirt. Someone had been using them recently. The walls were smooth like they had been cut with advanced tools at the bottom. Jake found a short hallway that ended at another door. This door had no handle, just another control panel. Jake tried the birthday code again, and the door slid open silently. What he saw inside made him drop the flashlight. The room was huge, much bigger than should fit inside the asteroid. The ceiling was high and covered with strange lights that gave off a blue glow, but the most amazing thing was the far wall. It was not a wall at all, but a window that showed a view of a planet. Jake picked up his flashlight and walked closer to the window. The planet on the other side had blue oceans and green continents. White clouds moved slowly across the surface. It looked like Earth, but not the Earth. He knew this Earth had no cities, no space stations, no signs of human life. The continents were shaped differently. Jake stared at the impossible view, trying to understand what he was seeing. The window was definitely showing a real place, not a recording. The clouds moved, and the planet slowly rotated. He could see weather patterns forming and storms developing in real time, but how could there be a window in an asteroid basement that showed a planet? Uncle Henry's voice seemed to echo in his memory, talking about secrets and ancient mysteries. Jake remembered the research files on temporal mechanics and dimensional studies. Maybe the old man had not been crazy after all. Maybe he had found something incredible out here in the empty space between worlds. Jake spent hours looking through the basement room. Besides the amazing window, there were computer screens showing data he could not understand. Charts and graphs covered the walls, along with star maps that showed solar systems he did not recognize. A desk in the corner had notebooks filled with Uncle Henry's handwriting. One notebook was different from the others. It had fresh ink and recent dates. Uncle Henry had been writing in it just days before he died. Jake opened it and read the final entry. It said, "The visitors know about Jake now. They have been watching our family for generations. Soon he will understand why the farm was never about growing food. It was about growing hope for humanity." Jake felt cold, despite the warm air in the room. Visitors watching his family. None of it made sense, but the evidence was right in front of him. The impossible basement, the window showing an unknown world, the research that went far beyond simple farming. Jake realized his inheritance was much more than a failing asteroid farm. He was now the owner of something that could change everything humans thought they knew about space and time. The question was, what would he do with it, and who were the visitors Uncle Henry had mentioned? Jake looked back at the window, showing the mysterious planet, and wondered if he was ready for the answers that were coming. Jake spent 3 days studying Uncle Henry's notebooks before he found the activation sequence. The instructions were written in code, using farming terms, but Jake finally understood that seed planting times actually meant power levels and harvest schedules were really frequency settings. The basement computer responded when he entered the correct combination. The window began to glow brighter, and Jake could hear a low humming sound coming from somewhere inside the walls. The view of the strange planet became clearer, and he could see more details. Massive forests covered the land, and huge creatures moved between the trees. They looked like dinosaurs, but bigger than any he had seen in museums. Jake was watching a herd of long-necked giants when something impossible happened. A person walked into view on the other side of the window. The person was wearing modern clothes and carrying equipment that looked like scientific instruments. Jake pressed his face against the window and saw that it was a woman with dark hair. The woman seemed to notice something and looked directly at the window. She appeared confused and walked closer. Jake could see her mouth moving like she was talking, but he could not hear any sound. He tried knocking on the window, and the woman stepped back in surprise. She pointed at the window and then at herself, clearly asking questions. Jake ran to Uncle Henry's desk and found a piece of paper. He wrote his name in large letters and held it up to the window. The woman nodded and pulled out her own notebook. She wrote something and showed it to him. The letters said Lisa Parker, Earth Research Team. Jake felt his heart racing. This was first contact with another human, but somehow they were on different sides of space and time. He wrote, "Where are you?" and held it up. Lisa wrote back, "Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago, Earth." Jake stared at the message, trying to process what it meant. Lisa was writing something else. She held up a new message that said, "How is this possible? You are in space. I am on prehistoric Earth." Jake wrote back, "Uncle Henry left me this farm. The window connects us." Lisa wrote, "Temporal bridge. We found artifacts that should not exist here." Over the next hour, Jake and Lisa communicated through written messages. Lisa explained that she was part of a secret research team, studying impossible technology buried in rock layers from millions of years ago. The artifacts were made of materials that would not be invented until far in the future. Someone had been on Earth long before humans evolved. Jake told Lisa about Uncle Henry's research and the visitors mentioned in the notebooks. Lisa wrote that her team had been seeing strange lights in the sky and finding more artifacts every day. Someone was watching them from both sides of time. Jake realized that Uncle Henry had been part of something much bigger than a simple asteroid farm. Lisa showed Jake some of the artifacts through the window. They were small devices that glowed with internal light and responded to touch like advanced computers. The technology was beyond anything humans had in either time period. Lisa wrote that the artifacts contained star maps showing the locations of hundreds of worlds. Jake found Uncle Henry's collection of similar devices hidden in the basement laboratory. The old man had been studying them for years, trying to understand their purpose. Jake activated one of the devices and symbols appeared in the air above it. Lisa became excited when she saw the holographic display and activated her own device. The symbols from both devices were identical. Jake and Lisa realized they were looking at some kind of universal language or mathematical system that worked across time periods. The devices were communicating with each other through the temporal bridge. Jake wrote to Lisa, asking if her team had found any records explaining who made the artifacts. Lisa wrote back that they had found one incomplete message buried deeper than the other artifacts. The message was in the same symbols, but her computer had partially translated it. The words mentioned something called the Great Scattering and warned about entities called devourers that consumed entire civilizations. Jake felt cold when he read about the devourers. Uncle Henry's notebooks mentioned them too. The old man believed they were coming and that humanity would need to be ready. Jake wrote to Lisa, telling her about Uncle Henry's research. Lisa responded that her team leader Dr. Martin Stone had similar theories. Lisa disappeared from the window for several minutes. When she returned, she brought Dr. Stone with her. The older man looked amazed when he saw Jake through the temporal bridge. Jake wrote down everything he knew about Uncle Henry's work, and the asteroid farm. Stone nodded and wrote back that they had been hoping to find someone like Jake. Stone explained through written messages that the artifacts were left by humans from an even earlier time period. These ancient humans had mastered time travel and space exploration, but something had forced them to scatter across the galaxy. The artifacts were communication devices and warning beacons. Jake learned that there were more temporal bridges hidden around the solar system. Uncle Henry had been part of a network of guardians watching for signs that the devourers were returning. Each guardian maintained a bridge site and monitored different time periods. The asteroid farm was just one of many hidden facilities. Wrote that her team had found evidence that the ancient humans had tried to prepare Earth for future threats. They had buried technology and knowledge that would be needed when humanity developed space travel. The temporal bridges were meant to connect past and future so that humans could share information across time. Jake realized why Uncle Henry had seemed so strange at family gatherings. The old man had been carrying the weight of humanity's future on his shoulders. Every day he watched for signs of the coming threat while pretending to be a simple asteroid farmer. Jake felt the same weight settling on his own shoulders. Now Dr. Stone wrote a new message saying that Lisa's team had detected unusual activity in their time period. Strange ships had been spotted near Earth, and the artifacts were becoming more active. Something was happening that would affect both time periods. Jake checked Uncle Henry's monitoring equipment and saw similar readings. Lisa wrote that they needed to work together to understand the ancient warnings. The artifacts contained maps and technical information, but the language was still mostly untranslated. Jake had Uncle Henry's translation work, and Lisa had fresh artifacts that might contain missing pieces. Jake spent the rest of the day copying Uncle Henry's translation notes onto paper and showing them to Lisa through the window. Lisa and Dr. Stone worked on their side to match the symbols with their own findings. They made breakthrough after breakthrough as information flowed between the two time periods. By evening, they had translated enough to understand the basic warning. The Devourers were not a natural phenomenon, but artificial entities, created by a civilization that had died out millions of years ago. The entities traveled from galaxy to galaxy, consuming all intelligent life. They found nothing had ever stopped them. The ancient humans had discovered the Devourers were coming to this galaxy. They had tried to build defenses, but realized that conventional weapons would not work. The only hope was to scatter humanity across time and space so that different groups could develop different solutions. Jake and Lisa were part of that plan. Their connection through the temporal bridge was not an accident, but a carefully designed system that would activate when the time was right. Jake wrote to Lisa, asking what they were supposed to do now. Lisa wrote back that they needed to find the other bridges and contact the other Guardians. Dr. Stone added that the artifacts contained technical specifications for weapons that existed outside normal time and space. These weapons could hurt the Devourers, but they required cooperation between past and future to build and operate. Jake realized that his simple inheritance had become the most important job in human history. As Jake prepared to end the communication session for the day, Lisa wrote one final message. She said that her team had detected the Devourers entering the outer edge of the galaxy. They were still far away, but moving toward Earth at impossible speeds. Jake had maybe months to prepare for the greatest battle humanity would ever face. Jake wrote back, promising to contact the other Guardians and begin preparations. Lisa promised to work on translating more of the ancient weapons technology. Together they would find a way to save humanity across all time periods. The temporal bridge dimmed as Jake shut down the system, but he knew this was just the beginning. Jake woke up to alarms screaming through the habitat. His computer screens showed multiple contacts approaching the asteroid farm. The ships were unlike anything in human databases. They moved in perfect formation without any visible engines or weapon systems. Jake counted 12 vessels, each one the size of a small moon. He rushed to the basement and activated the temporal bridge. Lisa appeared at the window, looking panicked. She held up a message that said, "Same ships here. They appeared over Earth an hour ago. Dr. Stone thinks they are the Watchers." Jake wrote back asking if the ships had attacked. Lisa shook her head and wrote, "They are just watching, but our equipment is going crazy." Climbed back upstairs to check his own sensors. The mysterious ships had taken positions around his asteroid but were not moving closer. His communication system crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a voice speaking perfect English. The voice was deep and calm, with no emotion. "We have been waiting for this moment. Jake Morrison, your species has reached the point where contact is necessary. We are the Cathara, and we have watched humanity grow across many worlds and many times. You and Lisa Parker have activated the bridge system as was intended." Jake grabbed his microphone and responded, "Who are you, and what do you want with us?" The voice answered, "We are the guardians of this galaxy. We have watched over the development of intelligent species for millions of years. Your species is unique among all we have observed." Through the temporal bridge, Jake could see that Lisa was also hearing the Cathara voice. Her team had gathered around her, and Dr. Stone was taking notes. The voice continued speaking to both time periods simultaneously. "Your Uncle Henry was one of our chosen observers. He monitored your progress in space, while Lisa unknowingly observed in the past." Jake felt angry and confused. "You have been spying on us. Why did you not help when humans faced disasters and wars?" The Cathara voice remained calm. "Interference would have changed your development. We needed to see if humans could solve problems through their own strength. Every species faces this test." Lisa wrote a message asking why the test was necessary. Jake held up the paper to his microphone and read the question aloud. The Cathara answered, "Because the Devourers are coming, and only a species with certain qualities can stop them." Every other race we tested has failed. The voice explained that the Cathara had been fighting the Devourers for over 1,000,000 years. They had watched hundreds of intelligent species rise and fall. Some species were too peaceful and could not organize effective resistance. Others were too aggressive and destroyed themselves before the Devourers arrived. Humans are different, the voice continued. You have the right combination of cooperation and independence. You fight when necessary, but also help those who need aid. You adapt to any environment and never surrender even when victory seems impossible. Jake asked why the ancient humans had scattered across time if they were so capable. The Cathara voice grew sad. Those were the first humans, and they came from outside this galaxy. They arrived here fleeing the but were few in number. They chose to seed this galaxy with human life and hide until their descendants were ready. Lisa held up a new message asking how many human colonies existed. The voice answered, there are human settlements on 300 worlds across this galaxy. Most do not know about each other or about their true origins. The scattering was designed to ensure survival. If some colonies were discovered, Jake learned that the asteroid farm was one of hundreds of communication nodes. Hidden throughout space, each node could connect to different time periods and locations. The network would allow all human settlements to coordinate when the final battle began. Uncle Henry had maintained this single node for 30 years. The Cathara ships began moving closer to both Jake's asteroid and Lisa's Earth. The voice explained that they were activating other nodes in the network. Soon Jake and Lisa would be able to communicate with humans from past and future, and from worlds they had never imagined. Jake watched his screens as the network came online. Signals appeared from dozens of different locations. Some came from space stations around distant stars. Others came from underground cities on dead worlds. A few signals came from time periods even further in the past than Lisa's era. The voice introduced Jake and Lisa to other node operators. There was Commander Alex Wright, managing a station in orbit around a neutron star. There was Dr. Kelly Adams, working from a hidden base inside a gas giant. And there was Professor Dan Murphy, operating from a research station 1,000 years in the future. Each operator had been chosen by the Cathara and trained by previous guardians. The network had been growing for millions of years, waiting for the moment when humanity would be ready to face the Devourers. Jake realized that Uncle Henry had been part of something incredibly so. Wrote, asking when the Devourers would arrive. The Cathara voice answered that the entities had already entered the outer regions of the galaxy. They moved slowly, consuming everything in their path. It would take them several months to reach the core worlds, where most human colonies existed. Jake asked what weapons could hurt the voice explained that conventional weapons were useless. The entities existed partially outside normal space and time. They could only be damaged by weapons that also existed in multiple dimensions. The ancient humans had designed such weapons, but never had time to build them. The weapons required resources and knowledge from multiple time periods. Jake's era had the advanced manufacturing capability. Lisa's time had access to certain rare materials that would be consumed before Jake's era. Professor Murphy's future time had mathematical formulas that had not been discovered yet. The Cathara revealed that they would help coordinate the weapon construction, but humans would have to do the actual work. They could provide transportation between node sites and protect the network from Devourer scouts, but they could not directly interfere with human decisions. Jake felt overwhelmed by the responsibility. The survival of the entire human species depended on a network of people like him operating hidden bases and ancient technology. He asked why the Cathara thought humans could succeed where other species had failed. Your species has already proven itself, the voice answered. You have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and the challenges of space colonization. Most importantly, you help each other even when cooperation is difficult. The Devourers have never faced a species that fights as effectively together as humans. Lisa held up a message, asking about the ancient artifacts her team had found. The Cathara explained that those devices contained partial weapon designs and manufacturing instructions. Each node site had different pieces of the puzzle. The full weapon system required information from all active nodes. Jake learned that the weapons worked by creating temporal loops that trapped the devourers outside normal space. Once trapped, the entities could be destroyed using concentrated energy from multiple time periods. The process required perfect timing and cooperation between past, present, and future. The voice warned that the devourers had scouts already searching for the network nodes. If any node was discovered and destroyed, the weapon system would not work. Jake and the other operators would have to defend their sites while building the weapons. Jake asked how much time they had to prepare. The Kithara calculated that the main devourer force would reach human space. In approximately 4 months, the weapon components had to be manufactured and distributed to defense positions throughout the galaxy. Before then, Lisa wrote that her team was ready to begin working on the prehistoric components. Dr. Stone had already started analyzing the artifacts and identifying the required materials. Jake checked his manufacturing systems and found that Uncle Henry had secretly upgraded them over the years. The asteroid farm had capabilities far beyond simple food production. Hidden fabricators could create exotic materials and assemble complex devices. Jake realized that Uncle Henry had been preparing for this moment his entire life. Everything was ready for the final test of humanity. Yes. The Kithara ships moved into position around the network nodes. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Millions of humans across space and time were depending on him and the other operators to coordinate the greatest defense in galactic history. The real work was about to begin. The network buzzed with activity as humans from dozens of time periods worked together on the weapon project. Jake coordinated manufacturing schedules while Lisa supervised archaeological excavations of ancient components. Professor Murphy provided mathematical calculations from the future, while Commander Wright managed resource distribution across space. Jake had not slept properly in days. His asteroid farm had become the central hub for the entire operation. The basement laboratory was filled with partially assembled weapon components that glowed with strange energies. Lisa's team had unearthed 12 complete artifact sets and was searching for more. The Kithara had provided transportation pods that moved between node sites instantaneously. Jake watched as Dr. Adams arrived from her gas giant station, carrying crystalline power cores that would not be invented for another century. The temporal mixing of technologies was giving him headaches. Lisa sent a message through the bridge reporting that our excavation had found something new. Deep beneath the other artifacts was a sealed chamber containing what appeared to be a complete weapon blueprint. The chamber also held a message from the ancient humans addressed to their descendants. Jake read the translated message aloud to the network. The ancient humans had known they could not stop the devourers with the technology of their time. Instead, they had created a plan spanning millions of years. Each generation of scattered humanity would add pieces to an ultimate weapon system. The weapon was called the Temporal Cascade, and it worked by creating a chain reaction across multiple time periods. When activated, it would lock the devourers in a time loop while simultaneously hitting them with energy from past, present, and future. The effect would destroy the entities completely. Professor Murphy confirmed that the mathematics were sound, but warned that the weapon required perfect synchronization across all time periods. If any node fired at the wrong moment, the cascade would fail, and the devourers would become immune to further attacks. Humanity would only get one chance. Jake studied the weapon blueprints and realized they needed more than just the network nodes to make it worked. The cascade required positioning devices throughout the galaxy at specific locations. The ancient humans had hidden these positioning devices on uninhabited worlds. Commander Wright reported that Kithara scouts had located most of the positioning devices, but some were in devourer-controlled territory. The entities had consumed 3 outer colonies and were moving faster than expected. Humanity had weeks instead of months to complete the weapon. Jake made the difficult decision to split the network operators into 2 teams. Half would continue building weapon components, while the other half would retrieve positioning devices from dangerous locations. He volunteered to lead one of the retrieval missions, despite having no combat experience. Lisa protested through the temporal bridge, writing that Jake was too important to risk. Dr. Stone supported her argument, saying that the network coordinator should stay safe. Jake replied that leadership meant taking the same risks as everyone else. Uncle Henry would have done the same thing. The Cathera provided Jake with a small ship equipped with temporal shielding and stealth technology. He flew toward the outer rim where Devourer scouts had been detected. The journey took 3 days, during which Jake practiced using the ancient weapons that Lisa's team had provided. The positioning device was located on a dead world that had once supported a human mining colony. Jake could see the remains of cities and spaceports as he approached. The device had left nothing alive, but had not bothered to destroy the abandoned structures. Jake landed near the coordinates provided by the ancient star maps. The positioning device was buried beneath what had been the colony's main power plant. Jake used a portable excavator to dig through the rubble while his sensors watched for Devourer activity. The device was larger than Jake expected, and seemed to be made of the same material as the artifacts. Lisa had found it activated when he touched it, displaying a holographic interface with symbols that matched his translation database. Jake realized he could control the device remotely once it was properly positioned. As Jake worked to extract the device, his sensors detected movement in orbit. A Devourer scout ship had arrived and was scanning the planet's surface. Jake knew he had minutes before the entity noticed his ship and investigated. The excavation was only half finished. Jake made a desperate decision. He used his ship's mining laser to blast away the remaining rubble, ignoring the risk of damaging the positioning device. The ancient technology proved more durable than expected, and the device emerged intact just as the Devourer scout began descending. Jake loaded the device into his cargo hold and activated the temporal shielding. The Devourer scout passed directly overhead, but its sensors could not penetrate the Cathara technology. Jake waited until the scout moved to the other side of the planet before launching his ship. The return journey was more dangerous, because other scouts had detected the temporal energy signature from the positioning device. Jake had to make 3 emergency jumps through hyperspace to avoid detection. Each jump brought him closer to his asteroid farm in safety. When Jake arrived back at the network hub, he found that other retrieval teams had been equally successful. Commander Wright had recovered 4 devices, while Dr. Adams had found 2 more. The network now had enough positioning devices to create the cascade. Lisa reported through the bridge that her archaeological team had made another discovery. The sealed chamber contained not just weapon blueprints, but also detailed information about Devourer weaknesses. The entities were vulnerable during their feeding process when they extended into normal space. Professor Murphy calculated that the cascade would be most effective when the Devourers were actively consuming a planet. The temporal energy would disrupt their feeding mechanism and trap them in a state where they could be destroyed. This meant waiting until the entities reached a major human colony. Jake felt sick at the implications. They would have to sacrifice an entire world to create the perfect moment. For the weapon, the people on that world would become bait to draw the Devourers into a trap. Jake wondered if he had the right to make such a decision. The network debated the ethical problems for hours, until Dr. Stone sent a message through Lisa. The colony worlds had been informed about the situation, and 3 had volunteered to serve as bait. The colonists were evacuating civilians, while military forces prepared to make a final stand. Commander Wright reported that the main Devourer fleet had accelerated and would reach the volunteer colony. In 6 days the weapon components were nearly complete, but the positioning devices still needed to be installed at their target coordinates. Jake would have to split the team again. Jake took personal responsibility for installing the most dangerous positioning device at the galaxy's central black hole. The location would maximize the cascade effect, but required flying through intense radiation and gravitational fields no human had ever attempted. Such a mission. Lisa sent a final message before Jake departed for the black hole. She had translated the last section of the ancient human message. It contained coordinates for a hidden refuge where the original humans had left additional technology. The refuge was located in the same time period as Lisa. Jake realized that Lisa would have to make her own dangerous journey to recover technology that might help the weapon succeed. He wanted to tell her to stay safe, but knew she would take the same risks he was taking. Leadership meant trusting others to do their jobs. As Jake prepared his ship for the journey to the Galactic Center, he thought about Uncle Henry and all the previous Guardians who had maintained the network. They had spent their lives preparing for this moment when humanity would face its greatest test. Jake was determined not to let them down. The positioning device in his cargo hold hummed with energy that seemed to respond to his thoughts. Jake wondered if the ancient humans had built some kind of consciousness into their technology. Perhaps they were still guiding humanity. Even after millions of years, Jake launched his ship toward the Galactic Center, knowing that the fate of every human who had ever lived depended on the success of his mission. The Cascade weapon was humanity's only hope against the Devourers, and he carried one of its most critical components. Behind him, the network continued its desperate race against time, building weapons that existed outside normal physics, installing devices that would reshape space itself, preparing for a battle that would determine whether humanity survived or joined the countless species that had fallen to the Devour. Jake struggled to maintain control of his ship as he approached the Galactic Center. The black hole's gravity pulled at every atom, while radiation storms battered his shields. The positioning device in his cargo hold had begun resonating with the massive gravitational field, creating harmonics that threatened to tear his ship apart through the network connection. Jake could hear reports from across the galaxy. The main Devourer fleet had reached the volunteer colony of New Geneva and begun their feeding process. The colonists had evacuated successfully, but their military forces were making a heroic last stand to buy time for the weapon. Lisa reported from prehistoric Earth that she had found the hidden refuge exactly where the ancient coordinates indicated. The technology inside was beyond anything they had discovered before. Weapons that could strike across dimensional barriers and shields that existed in multiple time periods simultaneously. Commander Wright coordinated the final positioning device installations while Professor Murphy fine-tuned the cascade calculations from his future laboratory. Dr. Adams had moved her gas giant station into position to serve as a relay point for the temporal energy. The entire network was ready except for Jake's critical device. Jake fought through the black hole's gravity well until he reached the installation coordinates. The ancient humans had chosen this location because it was the focal point of the galaxy's gravitational field. Energy released here would spread to every star system within days. A positioning device had to be placed precisely at the event horizon where space and time became distorted. Jake used his ship's robotic arms to deploy the device while fighting the tremendous forces trying to crush his vessel. The device activated automatically and began drawing power from the black hole itself. Jake tried to retreat to a safe distance, but his engines had been damaged by the radiation. His ship was trapped in decaying orbit around the black hole. Jake reported his situation to the network and told them to proceed with the cascade without him. The mission was more important than one person. Lisa's voice came through the temporal bridge, clear. Despite the gravitational interference, she had activated the refuge technology and discovered that it included a rescue system. The ancient humans had faced similar situations and built tools to extract people from impossible locations. Jake watched in amazement as a portal opened near his ship. The same blue energy that powered the temporal bridges created a tunnel through space itself. Jake flew his damaged ship through the portal and emerged in normal space near Lisa's time period on Earth. Rescue had taken precious minutes, and the Devourer feeding process was accelerating. Commander Wright reported that the entities were beginning to extend into normal space, making themselves vulnerable. Jake told the network to begin the cascade. Sequenced immediately, every human in the network felt the moment when the cascade activated. The positioning devices across the galaxy began resonating in perfect harmony, creating waves of temporal energy that converged on the Devourer fleet. The entities found themselves trapped in a time loop where past, present, and future overlapped. Jake watched through his sensors as the cascade effect spread. The Devourers tried to retreat to their dimensional refuge, but the temporal loop prevented them from moving in any direction. The ancient weapon worked exactly as designed, trapping the entities where they could be destroyed. The final phase required all network operators to channel energy through their nodes. Simultaneously, Jake felt the power flowing through his connection to Lisa and the others. The combined will of humanity across millions of years focused into a single, devastating attack. The Devourers began to dissolve as the cascade energy disrupted their existence. The entities that had consumed hundreds of civilizations were finally meeting something they could not devour: human determination and cooperation across impossible distances and time periods. Jake felt exhausted as the cascade reached its peak. The network had been running at maximum capacity for hours, and several operators were approaching their limits, but the weapon continued to function, drawing strength from the interconnected human settlements across the galaxy. The Cathara ships that had been observing suddenly moved into action. They began attacking Devourer vessels that were trying to escape the cascade effect. The ancient Guardians had decided that humanity had proven worthy of direct assistance in the final battle. Commander Wright reported that volunteer fleets from human colonies were arriving at the battle zone. Miners, farmers, traders, and settlers had answered the call, bringing whatever weapons they could find. They might not have military training, but they had something more important. Jake realized what made humans special as he watched the volunteer fleets coordinate their attacks. Other species fought with rigid tactics and formal command structures. Humans adapted, constantly changing their approach as the situation developed. Every ship captain made independent decisions. The battle lasted for 3 days as the cascade gradually destroyed the Devourers. Jake coordinated supply runs, while Lisa provided tactical information from the ancient technology. Professor Murphy calculated firing solutions that allowed volunteer ships to hurt entities that existed in multiple dimensions. On the final day, the last Devourer vessel was destroyed by a mining ship using a modified asteroid cracker. The cascade had worked perfectly, eliminating the threat that had plagued the galaxy for millions of years. Humanity had succeeded where every other species had failed. The network celebrated, but Jake felt the weight of what they had accomplished. The volunteer colony of New Geneva had been completely destroyed, and thousands of people had died in the battle. Jake wondered if the victory had been worth the cost. Lisa sent a message through the temporal bridge that answered his doubts. The ancient technology in the refuge included historical records showing what happened to galaxies that fell to the Devourers. The entities consumed every form of life, leaving nothing but dead worlds. The sacrifice at New Geneva had saved trillions. The Cathara contacted the network with an official message of congratulations. They announced that humanity would be welcomed as the new guardians of the galaxy. The network nodes would be expanded to include every human settlement, and Earth would become the center of galactic civilization. Jake learned that the temporal bridges would remain active, allowing constant communication between past, present, and future. Humanity would never again face existential threats alone. The scattered colonies would become a unified civilization spanning space and time. Professor Murphy reported from the future that the victory had profound consequences. Human technology advanced rapidly as different time periods shared knowledge. The species that had started on a single planet eventually explored other galaxies, carrying the lessons learned from the Devourer. Lisa sent word that the prehistoric human settlements would be preserved as living museums, where future generations could study their origins. The ancient humans had finally achieved their goal of ensuring humanity's survival across all possible timelines. Jake received a personal message from a descendant living 500 years in the future. The temporal network had detected signs of another cosmic threat in a distant galaxy. Humanity would be needed again to help species facing their own version of the Devourers. Jake smiled as he read the message. Humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. The species that had started as scattered refugees had become the protectors. Of all intelligent life, the network that Uncle Henry had helped maintain would serve as the foundation for a new kind of civilization. The asteroid farm continued operating as Jake's base, but its purpose had changed from simple food production to serving as headquarters for the Galactic Protection Network. Jake kept Uncle Henry's old equipment as a reminder of how far humanity had come. Jake often stood in the basement looking through the temporal bridge at Lisa's prehistoric Earth. He could see the beginnings of the world that would eventually produce the human species that saved the galaxy. The circle was complete, but the story would continue forever, as Jake prepared for his next mission to help threatened species in distant galaxies. He thought about Uncle Henry's final message about growing hope for humanity. The old man had been right. The farm had never been about growing food. It had been about growing the future.